Okay, terrific. Thank you. I'm very excited, and we're very excited to be able to present our book that was released last July, just a few months ago. Uh, it was published by Cambridge University Press. The authors are myself, Vinto, and Andy Gow, and we had never met before, actually, before we started on this project. We were approached by Cambridge University Press asking for us to put together a proposal for this particular topic of language and literacy. And we conceived that there was a very great need for it, and that we should try to focus from the very beginning years, foundation year, right through to year 10, potentially year 12. So it was an ambitious thing that we set out to do. And we could see there was a great need because language and literacy knowledge, the focus of our book, is foundational across all teaching areas, and in the Australian curriculum, it's one of the core areas that's covered across all disciplines. What we've known for some time now through teaching our own courses is that teachers require explicit knowledge to teach effectively across the curriculum, and very much the students we meet lack especially the meta language and the explicit knowledge that is required for teachers to be prepared to teach language and literacy in the classroom. So what our book hopefully does is it responds to gaps in initial teacher education and teacher support programs. It aligns with the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, the APST, and also the Australian curriculum. And in fact, throughout the book, there are references to the Australian curriculum for students to refer to. And it provides essential knowledge and practice examples as well. And most relevant recently with the TEEP requirements for tertiary institutions for literacy. If you don't know TEEP, it's the Tertiary Education Experts Panel. What they require us to do, we have actually covered in our book quite well. So our aim was to equip all teachers. So in our title of the book, or the subtitle, we say essential knowledge for all teachers, and it really is. So no matter what you teach, literacy is something that all teachers need to have knowledge of, and all teachers are teachers of literacy. They need to understand language explicitly, they need to teach literacy effectively, and they need to support diverse learners. So another focus of our book is that it has a big secondary focus on the requirements of EALD teaching and intercultural components of literacy. Another aim to help teachers recognise that all teachers are teachers of language and literacy, and to support equitable participation and student success. So the book is for all pre-service teachers, but also in-service teachers from primary to secondary, and also educators supporting diverse learners. And anyone that's teaching English across the curriculum. So as textbooks go, it really is the perfect book for any foundational program in any teacher education program in Australia, and potentially overseas as well. However, our book is very much written for the Australian market. Perhaps if you like what you see and you're in another country, you might want to contact us or contact Cambridge and ask if they could slightly modify it. I'm sure they'd be keen. So what makes this book different? It focuses specifically on language and literacy knowledge, not just literacy teaching methods. It provides clear explanations of all meta-language through glossaries to build teacher confidence in the understanding of concepts and the use of meta-language. It's grounded in Australian education policy and also classroom realities. So we've tried to keep in mind the special cohort of students that we have in Australia and to write for them as well. It's structured to be accessible for first year initial teacher education students, but it still is deep and rigorous enough for practicing teachers to get a lot out of it. This is the structure of the book, just taken from the table of contents. So the topics are phonological awareness. The authors' names are written there, and we'll present a little bit on each of these for the rest of the presentation, followed by phonemic awareness, morphological awareness, grammar, social use of language, English language diversity and change. And this first part it introduces the language and literacy fundamentals from a theoretical perspective. And then the second part, developing language and literacy, goes a bit more deeply into the pedagogy involved with a lot of these methods for developing vocabulary, teaching text types and grammar, developing oracy, developing reading, developing writing, and developing critical literacy. The key features of the book: there's clear explanations and a lot of classroom-ready examples, discussion questions for every chapter at the end, further reading and resource links, URLs, and a comprehensive glossary for each chapter for quick reference. So first of all, the first chapter starts in the foundation years, foundation to about year three, and it's a focus on explaining how children acquire spoken language before school and why this matters for their early literacy development. It provides teachers with practical strategies to build phonological awareness, which means covering the teaching of syllables, rhyme, stress, and intonation as a foundation for reading and writing, and connects early speech, motor, cognitive, and social development to classroom practice, and also the early years learning framework, which is the early years or preschool framework for teacher educators in the early years. The second chapter, phonemic awareness, moves on to define phonemic awareness as the ability to hear and manipulate individual sounds in words, and explains its role as a predictor of reading success. It demonstrates how phonemic awareness links to phonics, instruction, and decoding of texts, with classroom-ready examples and skill progressions provided for teachers. It clarifies English's complex sound-to-spelling system and shows how teachers can support learners through explicit systematic practice. Hand over to you, Vin, to talk about morphological awareness.
Thanks, Michael. In chapter 3, we explained morphological awareness in relation to child language development and system of language. We discussed important concepts related to the structure of words, including awareness of morphemes and different types of morphemes and their subtypes. And we also explained how words got their meaning and how they developed throughout the history, known as etymology. We highlight the innovative approach to the teaching of spelling known as a structural inquiry drawn on evidence by research, and provides very practical classroom activity for teachers to teach spelling and vocabulary using structural inquiry. In chapter 4, we discussed two traditional grammar and functional grammar. First, we highlight the necessity for pre-service and in-service teachers to be equipped with explicit knowledge of two grammar traditions to be able to teach in contemporary English classroom. We explain key concepts of traditional grammar and functional grammar, and we provide explicit and essential knowledge about grammar for all teachers in Australian school. We provide practical example and analysis for each explained grammar concept, which can be easily adopted and adapted by teachers to use in their classroom.
In chapter 5, we focus on one, I think probably the most exciting part of language use, and that's to do with the social use of language for effective communication and interaction. We also think this is probably could be the most challenging part for EALD students, because this is a lot to do with the cultural upbringing, and the way they work with language could be very different from their first language and a second language. So we'll be talking about, the chapter will be talking about language use in various contexts for different functions. The students, ELD students, often can associate with particular form language with one particular function, but then they need to learn that they can use that different forms language for different functions in different contexts. and especially things like literal and non-literal language. And also, they need to learn how linguistic and non-linguistic resources play a very important role in effective communication as well. So we hope that this chapter will provide some additional support for ELD students' language development in this particular important area of language use.
And chapter 6 is about English language diversity and change, which follows on from social components of language. It introduces plurilingualism. Most teachers would have heard of bilingualism. Plurilingualism is more of a European construct, which we're trying to enforce here because it takes a very positive view of the ability to speak multiple languages. And it's something I think teachers really need to know about. And I think in Australia, because we have a lot of Anglophiles here, that they may not appreciate the special skills, and especially pre-service teachers may not appreciate the special skills, the bilingual or plurilinguistic advantage that some of these students have. So what we look at is plurilingualism, but also English as a lingua franca, repositioning linguistic diversity as an asset rather than a deficit. It equips teachers to support EALD learners through intercultural competence and inclusive pedagogies that value home language resources. So there are plenty of examples of the ways that teachers can prepare lessons that are inclusive and drawing upon their students' plurilingual cultural background and the texts from their society, and encouraging them to bring them into the classroom and share them as a resource. And finally, this chapter challenges assumptions about standard Australian English as a construct. It's a term used in the Australian curriculum that I think is probably overused without really thinking about who Australia is, who Australians are, and how we use language. And even Australian English, in all of its vernacular variations, needs to be unpacked, and that's what this chapter does. And the chapter also talks about encouraging classrooms where multiple Englishes and cultural identities are recognised and respected.
I think the book is for teachers in general. It's not just about ELD teachers, but teachers of all subjects across different schooling levels. So we're trying to persuade teachers, and no matter where they teach which subjects, that vocabulary is very important for their students' language proficiency development and eventually their academic success in different subject areas. We also highlight the significance of vocabulary development in relation to reading comprehension, which is quite straightforward for all applied linguists, but teachers of different subjects may need a bit of persuasion. We also show them how they can respond to vocabulary-related issues in teaching. So we talk about different types of vocabulary and effective vocabulary instructional strategies. And we try to encourage you to address the vocabulary issues in different subject learning and help the students to build vocabulary for reading comprehension and writing development in relation to their particular subject areas.
So chapter I explore the concept of text-drawn families and typical tactile tasks across school years, such as factory accounts, information report, and procedure. It provides detailed analysis of three selected tactiles in terms of their social purposes, structural stages, and language feature to illustrate how they function differently and how language features vary depending on different social purposes. It's also introduced an explicit pedagogy for the teaching of grammar and tactiles and any other aspect of language and literacy, namely the teaching learning cycle, incorporating the gradual release of responsibility model of instruction to provide effective scaffolding for student learning outcome. I'm sure the majority of you here, SFL people, are very familiar with this model, and they will again introduce this model in one of his chapters later in the book.
Chapter 9 is on an often neglected area of literacy, and that is oracy. The chapter establishes oracy as a core literacy skill. It's also one of the skills that has been outlined by the TEEP review of literacy in university courses, particularly in the early years of learning to read. The big 6 of literacy includes, of course, spoken language. Oracy is more than that, it's also listening skills. So this is a comprehensive chapter covering both these things, showing how spoken language underpins thinking, learning, comprehension, and participation across all curriculum areas. So the chapter takes the approach that speaking is an essential component in all classroom activities, and stresses the importance of engaging students' multisensory reception in the classroom, and using a multi-skill approach, of which speaking is a very important part. The chapter provides explicit frameworks and classroom strategies for teaching talk, including dialogic teaching, structured discussion, listening skills, presentations, questioning, and reasoning. It highlights equity and inclusion, showing how intentional oracy instruction supports multilingual learners and those needing confidence to speak in academic contexts.
Chapter 10 is about reading, something we are very familiar with. And I think it's reading, I have to emphasize that because of the ChatGPT and the generative AI tools, people start losing interest in reading. I think I may see many things, sort of things like that among our students. So reading is a critical skill for learning and understanding new information and cognitive development. We have emphasized that the reading is a critical skill for learning and cognitive development. Because I think for understanding information, so a lot of people are using machines to generate summary for them. The chapter also focuses on different stages of reading development, how reading works, how different reading process, and also I think teachers probably need a most workable model of reading. That's why we talk about simple view reading. We also talk about strategies for teaching reading, including like guided reading or model reading strategy, how use technology effectively to promote reading. As Michael and Ving mentioned in their chapters, this chapter, of course, will focus on ELD students' reading development and support as well. Oh, chapter 11 is about writing. So it's like a pair reading and writing. So it's traditionally two traditional blocks of literacy. Again, we know that writing is a critical skill for academic and professional success. And in this chapter we go through and try to present an overview of writing demands in schools and stage in writing development. Again, we focus on writing instruction strategies, especially like teaching learning cycle, which I think being mentioned in her chapter as well. The chapter is focused on ELD students' writing development support as well. I think this is an important chapter because I think so many people are just using generative AI tools to become writings, and so it's really important for us to help our students develop appropriate level of writing competence for their academic studies and future career.
And chapter 12 is on critical literacy. These days, the Australian curriculum has retermed critical literacy into creative and critical thinking. So that's what this chapter mostly aligns with. In this chapter, critical literacy is framed as an essential skill, especially in view of the media saturation we now have in our lives. All of us are using smartphones, interacting with social media. We're being presented with algorithms that feed news to us that it perceives we want to see. And very often, I think the general population, the whole community, is beginning to be caught in an echo chamber that is of an algorithm's making. So more than ever, it's important to be informing our pre-service teachers to instruct students to not just see texts as these things that we read and accept them on face value. And by text, this chapter embraces text in all its wider meanings. So in line with the Australian curriculum, reading, writing, speaking, listening, and viewing, it also treats the visual text as an important artifact that needs to be deconstructed critically. So in the chapter, there's quite a comprehensive introduction on critical theory, which is, I think, a very important thing for teachers to understand, the theoretical background of what we call now critical thinking or critical literacy. And we use the 4 resources model, so both of them. So not just Luke and Freebody's original model, but also a model which takes into consideration the visual aspect of literacy and critical literacy of that. So it very much is comprehensive as a guide to analysis of both print and multimodal texts. In this chapter, there are practical strategies to help students to recognize voice, ideology, representation, and power, to develop thoughtful, informed, and ethical text users and producers. So this final chapter is a kind of a culminating chapter, if you like, for a lot of the skills and knowledges that are taught throughout the book. And hopefully something that teachers will enjoy using and implementing in the classroom. Okay. So in terms of availability, it's been available since July. I've been using it this last semester with 2 of my courses. And the way I set it up for them, we use Canvas, and I can link to a reading guide where they can access the library collection. And because our library pays for a Cambridge Library e-collection license, all of my students can read the textbook free of charge, unlimited downloads and unlimited viewing. So it's a very good way to integrate a textbook into the class, into your course. And a lot of students are using it. Almost 100% hits on students using this textbook in the course. And finally, these are our details, our bio. So Vin is at the University of Tasmania, of course, and Andy at the University of New South Wales. I'm at the University of the Sunshine Coast. We all have areas of specialisation which have come to bear in the creation of this book. I think Cambridge University Press managed to find the right people for these individual chapters. I'm very happy with how it's all come together. I think collectively and individually, we've all done a fantastic job, if I may say so myself.
Thanks so much, Michael and Andy. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for your leadership on this project, and Andy for co-authoring this book with us. And thanks everyone for your listening today. And we really look forward to your review. If you are interested in writing a review for our book, we would love to hear from you. Please give us feedback when you read the book, or if you or anybody that you know adopt the book, and we would love to hear the feedback from you and your student as well.